In this video, we will review quickly the nature of theory, including theories of persuasion, and then demonstrate theoretical thinking about persuasion by examining in detail a specific theory, the extended parallel process model of persuasion. Let's begin by reviewing what we mean by theory. Earlier in this quarter, one of my colleagues introduced you to this term, so I'll be brief. A theory is nothing more than a system of ideas that are brought together to explain something. Theories are explanations. For example, the theory of cognitive dissonance explains that negative feeling we get inside when we become aware of a discrepancy between our values and our actions. Theories are abstractions. What does this mean? Well, an abstraction is an idea having no physical or concrete existence. In the social sciences, this typically means that we are dealing with a set of ideas, our theory, that is not tied to any specific observation. Rather, it summarizes and explains a class of observations without reference to any specific one. A theory must be testable. We must be able to falsify it. A theory is testable if we can logically deduce specific predictions from it that can be shown to be supported or not supported. These predictions, when tested in a specific study, are called our hypotheses. Thus, a theory of persuasion is a system of ideas that explains something about persuasion. For example, we have theories that explain how we process persuasive messages. There are theories that focus on the role of emotion in persuasion. Other theories seek to explain how we integrate information in an argument to draw a conclusion. There are also very specific theories that deal with the impact of certain types of messages. Let's consider briefly how theories are used in persuasion research. Scholars who do research to understand the persuasion process find it necessary to use a variety of theories. As long as the theories selected are logically consistent with each other, this presents no problem. As I already noted, a theory tends to have a specific focus. For this reason, an investigator may need to utilize two or more theories in the same study. For example, I recently completed a study that drew upon a cognitive theory of persuasion, a linguistic theory, and a theory about fear appeals that we will be examining in a moment. It should be clear then that just as there is no unified theory of physics, there is no unified theory of persuasion. I personally doubt that there will ever be such a theory, and I also see no reason why we need a single unified persuasion theory. That's my personal view. For the rest of this video, we will practice what it means to think theoretically about persuasion. We will do so by taking a look at a theory called the extended parallel process model, EPPM for short. This theory was introduced a couple of decades ago and continues to be used extensively today. It was developed by a communication researcher, Dr. Kim Whitty, at Michigan State University. This theory helps us to think analytically and abstractly about the use of fear in persuasion. As you know, fear is often used to persuade others. We are told that smoking will cause lung cancer and bad nutrition can give us diabetes. A member of the clergy might tell us that if we live sinful lives, we will spend eternity in the fiery pits of hell. ADT seeks to convince us that our home will eventually be burglarized and our kids put at risk. Life insurance companies tell us that if we die unexpectedly, our spouse and kids could be sentenced to a life of poverty. The EPPM model is an abstraction. It is not tied to any one of these observations, but can nevertheless help us to understand all of them. So let's roll up our sleeves and get down to work. EPPM can be presented as a set of verbal propositions. Those propositions can be more clearly represented in a model, a diagram, which is what I will be using today. Let's start with the upper left-hand part of the diagram. The starting point for explanation for this theory is an external stimulus that makes us aware of a threat of some sort. That stimulus could be a news story, a tragic event, such as our obese friend who died of a heart attack last week, and so forth. The model is typically used, however, to examine the impact of a persuasive message. I will restrict my comments to persuasive messages that use fear. The model tells us that a fear appeal, a message intended to arouse fear, should address at least four components: self-efficacy, response efficacy, susceptibility, and severity. To illustrate these components, let's suppose that a doctor wants to convince Jim to quit smoking. One thing she will need to do is convince Jim that he is able to quit smoking. She might tell Jim, for example, of new medications that will reduce his withdrawal symptoms. This is self-efficacy. Jim, you can quit. The doctor might also tell Jim that his body has the capacity to heal some of the damage he has already done to himself. This is response efficacy. Quitting works, Jim. She might also give Jim statistics to show just how vulnerable he is. This is susceptibility. Jim, you are at risk. The doctor will then remind Jim of the severe damage that cigarettes are doing to him. This is severity in the model. These risks are really, really bad, Jim. Jim has heard his doctor's argument. He must now process what he has been told. With regard to efficacy, Jim will probably ask himself if he is really capable of quitting. This is self-efficacy. Jim will also try to determine if the recommendation, quit smoking, would actually work in preventing smoking-related diseases from coming to him. This is response efficacy. If Jim believes that the doctor's recommendation would be effective and he can implement it, he has efficacy. In response to the doctor's message, Jim will also assess the extent of the threat. He will feel highly threatened if he believes that smoking will produce severe consequences, and he concludes that he is susceptible to these consequences. Both severity and susceptibility must be present for Jim to perceive a threat. If you are personally convinced of the great dangers of smoking, but you are a non-smoker, you will probably feel no threat. It is possible that Jim will perceive no threat. He might believe wrongly that he is not at risk because he only smokes 1 pack a day, uses filtered cigarettes, and so forth. He might recall that his grandfather smoked and lived to be 80. Whitty tells us that people will respond differently to the same message because of individual differences. Some people, for example, are more prone to experience anxiety than others. These individual differences can affect our response to a fear appeal. Persuaders use fear because they wish to arouse fear. The assumption is that fear can be motivational. To continue with our example, fear will be aroused in Jim if he believes that he is susceptible to severe harms that his doctor has described. At this point, Jim's response to what the doctor has said can lead him down one of two paths. Jim might be motivated to protect himself by heeding his doctor's advice, or he might get defensive and do nothing constructive. Let's start with protection motivation. Jim will be motivated to take action to protect himself from the dangers of smoking if he has efficacy. In fact, because there is something effective that he can do, that is, quit smoking, he may not even experience all that much fear. Adoption of the doctor's recommendation to quit, and perhaps acceptance of the medication prescription that she offers to treat withdrawal symptoms, is adaptive. Jim is adapting to the situation as he now perceives it. Jim quits smoking. The process involved is danger control. Jim is trying to control the dangers of smoking by giving up smoking. That's a good thing. Persuaders want their audiences to take this pathway in response to their fear appeal. Our hypothetical doctor wants Jim to control the dangers of smoking by taking the adaptive step of quitting. However, as we have seen, there's another possible outcome. Jim could get defensive. Defensive motivation will happen if Jim believes he is at risk for serious harm but lacks efficacy. Perhaps the doctor did not convince Jim that quitting would address the damage he has already done to himself. In the terminology of the EPPM, Jim may have low response efficacy. He thinks it's too late to quit. Or perhaps Jim knows that the doctor's advice is good advice, but he has tried to quit so many times before. This time would be no different, he tells himself. That's low self-efficacy. Jim will thus respond in a maladaptive way, in a way that does not control the danger. He might rationalize by telling himself that everyone dies eventually. He might convince himself that there are worse things for one's health than smoking. At least he does not smoke crack. Jim might even derogate the doctor. What does she know? She's so young. Jim might tell himself wishfully that he will be okay. By the time I get cancer, they will have a cure for it, he thinks to himself. EPPM gives us a name for this process. Fear control. Jim's maladaptive response might make his fear go away, but these responses will not make the threat to his health go away. He has not helped himself. EPPM, like all theories, explains at an abstract level. It does have real-world value, however. These models tell me that if I want to persuade you through fear, I need to construct a fear appeal that does 4 things. I must make you aware that there is a threat in your environment. That threat is severe. The threat must be something that applies to you. You are susceptible. I have a recommendation for you that will make the threat go away, or at least lessen its severity or likelihood of occurrence. The response I suggest to you is effective. That's response efficacy. Finally, I have to convince you that you are able to adopt the recommendation. You have the personal capacity, knowledge, skills, and so forth to take the steps I have suggested. That's self-efficacy. In conclusion, I hope that by reviewing this one theory of persuasion, I've taken some of the mystery out of theory and its use. As you can see, theories are very practical things.